Hey everybody, this is Lynn Hayes, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the astrological influences for the remainder of the year 2020. Most of you, or some of you, have been on this journey with me for quite some time, and some of this will be familiar, but I'm going to prepare the video as if nobody has ever heard anything about what's been going on this year. Clearly, there's been a lot of astrological influences. There has been a lot of political chaos and disruption, and now, of course, we have the virus, the COVID-19 that we're dealing with. So a lot of people have asked me for this information about what is coming up, and so I hope you'll find it helpful. If you have any questions or need any information, please leave it in the comments in the description box. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what brought us here to this place. I think it's helpful to look back at the past and see where we've been before we talk about what's coming up. So there's been a very strong influence of the sign Capricorn for the last 12 years. Pluto, the planet of transformation, death, rebirth, creative destruction. Pluto is a pretty powerful planet despite what the astronomers tried to do to demote it. And Pluto changes signs approximately every 15 to 20 years. It varies depending on where in the zodiac Pluto is traveling through. But in 2008, Pluto moved into the sign Capricorn. Capricorn is the sign of the structures of society. It has to do with governments and religious organizations and marriages and all, businesses and corporations. So you can see what's been happening over the last 12 years with Pluto and Capricorn and how our world has been changed. When Pluto moved into Capricorn, of course, we had the financial crash. Capricorn is also associated with realism. Capricorn is all about the material world. It's about building structures that will be long-lasting, and it's about destroying structures that are not serving us in our world. So, I also wanted to mention that Saturn, the planet that is associated with Capricorn, it's said to rule Capricorn. Saturn moved into Capricorn in 2017. So once Saturn moved into Capricorn, we started to get this big alignment of Capricorn planets. In December of 2019, Jupiter also moved into Capricorn. So some of you will remember that in the information from the Astrology for 2019, there's a video that is somewhere on my YouTube channel that you can find. I spoke about this upcoming Saturn-Pluto conjunction. So when you have Saturn, the planet of tests and challenges and restriction, conjunct the planet of destruction, you can see that things would get pretty intense. And that began in the spring of 2019. Those two planets came within a couple of degrees of each other. So the alignment didn't quite culminate yet, but by December of 2019, the two were pretty close together again. So the conjunction was beginning to form again. And at that time, Jupiter, the planet of expansion and ideals, and the planet that describes what gives our life meaning, Jupiter went into the sign of Capricorn. And then Mars was in Capricorn. So there was a lot of Capricorn energy. Mars actually didn't go into Capricorn until, I think, around March. But there was a lot of Capricorn. So not just Capricorn, though. There was destruction in Capricorn with Pluto. There was tests and challenges and sort of a reality check when Saturn was in Capricorn. And then those two planets, Saturn and Pluto, came together January 11th or so. So we had all been watching that and anticipating some kind of market collapse or some kind of destruction of some kind. And then nothing really happened. And astrologers were like, well, what happened? This is unusual. Well, of course, it was at that time that the virus was starting to explode all around the world. And it's the spread of the virus has brought a real reality check to all of us in terms of economics and in terms of relationships and in terms of families and our life goals. So this is sort of what's been happening the first half of the year. Now we're looking ahead to the second half of the year. So let's talk a little bit about the eclipse that's coming up on the solstice. So that's a powerful alignment when you have an eclipse, a solar eclipse, at the moment of the solstice where we are at the 0 degree of Cancer. So the 0 degree of the cardinal signs mark the solstices and the equinoxes. They're big times of where the energy starts to shift. We have the summer solstice, we have the autumn equinox, we have the winter solstice and the vernal equinox in the spring at the Aries point. So this is the 0 degree point of Cancer, and we have a solar eclipse. So the energy for that is pretty powerful. And if you want to learn more about that, please look at my video for the week of June 14th, where I talked about that. I'll probably talk about that during the video for the week of the 21st as well. But in any case, that sort of marks a portal of an energy release. Now, the other thing that's happening right now is that we have a lot of planets that are retrograde. I'm hoping that this is going to come through on the video, but I want to show you this little diagram here that I have made so that you'll be able to see what's happening. So here in January, well, before I get into that, it's very unusual to have 0 planets retrograde or 1 or 2. That's very unusual. 3 or 4 planets retrograde at one time is most typical. So when we're talking about retrograde planets, most people have heard of Mercury retrograde, but all of the planets can turn retrograde because we observe the movement of the planets from Earth. And when a planet is in retrograde motion, it has a stronger effect on us, especially if it's aspecting some sensitive point in our chart. But generally, when there are a lot of planets retrograde, so really anything more than 4, there is a strong influence of looking backwards. Our attention is drawn backwards. We have to redo what we've already done. It becomes very difficult to move forward, to have goals for the future, to be able to make, significant changes in our life. So I just want to show you on this diagram. So here in January, we had 0 planets retrograde, and then we had 1. Then in March, we also had 0. Then it started to increase. So we have 1 planet retrograde in April, we start to have 2 in May, and then we are up to 3 and then 4 by the end of May. So May was very significant in terms of planetary movement. There were 3 planets that turned retrograde within a week. So all of a sudden, there's this big shift backwards. And that was just as the lockdowns were starting to open up a little bit for Memorial Day. But now you can see, so June 18th, we have Mercury turning retrograde. That will be the 5th planet. And then between June and the middle of October here, there are between 5 and 7 planets retrograde. This dark red line here is when we have 7 planets retrograde. Now that number 7 includes Chiron, which some people wouldn't include, just to clarify. But in any case, you can see that it won't be until early November when we even go down to 4 planets retrograde. So what does that actually mean for us in our life? I think the biggest thing happening right now, well, there's two big things happening, and they're going to be more connected. So the first thing is the COVID-19 virus, which has sort of taken over the world. And a lot of people are hopeful that if they can just deny that it's happening, this is how it looks to me anyway. Let's just deny that anything is happening, open up all the businesses, and everything will be fine. The more that happens, the more these retrogrades are going to pull us back. You know, there's going to be some opening up, and then there's going to be some closing. So a lot of people are talking about the second wave, but the astrology says that there's going to be not two waves, but there's going to be a spike and then a little bit of a drop. And then when things open up, another spike. So the big message of this virus right now is that our lives are changing. We are not soon going to be the same. There is, you know, there are all kinds of things that we can say about what the virus is doing. It's putting us all on pause. It's forcing us to turn inwards. It's keeping us in a place, it's putting us in a box. Depending on where you live, you might be in more of a box. I have clients in big cities who haven't left their home in weeks. But it's changing our lives, and it's really making us, it's forcing us to look within at the changes that we need to make in our life. It's really confronting us with ourselves, really. So I don't see that astrologically going away really anytime soon. I think we're looking at least the end of October. So I want to talk a little bit about some of these retrogrades, especially Mars. So when Mars turns retrograde on September 9th, that's when there's going to be 7 planets retrograde. And Mars is going to move into Aries in July. Now, because Mars is turning retrograde, which it only does every couple of years, Mars is going to be in Aries until January of 2021. So it's going to be in there for a very long time, which means for us personally that it's going to be spending, I think that's 5 months, 5 to 6 months in one of the houses in our chart. So if you look and see where Mars is in your chart, that's the area of your life that's going to be activated. And if you have any questions about that, just leave me a note in the description box. So I've prepared a little video that I'd like to show. Again, I'm hoping that this is going to work here. So this video is it moves quickly, so you'll have to sort of pay attention. But this video will show you where these big planets are. So when I say the big planets, I'm talking the ones that are most active right now. So we have Jupiter here, we have Pluto here, and Saturn. This is as of February, so we're going back in time a little bit. So I'm going to run this forward a little bit. So here's February, and you could see by the middle of March, we had Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto all lined up here in the sign of Capricorn. Then we have just Jupiter and Pluto now. Saturn has gone into Aquarius, and Mars is pretty far away. Now here we have Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn all lined up, and Mars is in Aries. I can't use my pointer or the controls will be hidden or will show up. But here we see in July, Mars is already at 14 degrees Aries. So now Mars is at 27 degrees Aries by the end of August. So all through August, Mars is going to be challenging these planets of Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. Then Mars is going to turn retrograde, did you see, at 28, and now it's moving backwards. And again, it's in this tight square in October. This diagram shows November, but it's already retrograded down to 15 degrees Aries, so it's a little past the exact moment. And then it turns direct again, and here we are at, well, I just lost that, but anyway. So I love that sort of, diagrams that will show you sort of what's happening so you can see the visual. But in any case, that really takes us into November. Now let's talk a little bit about the Pluto return in the chart for the United States. So Pluto in the chart, in the commonly accepted chart for the United States, Pluto is at 27 degrees Capricorn, and Pluto is going to be heading towards that degree in the next few years. So when Pluto returns to its place in a natal chart, which it never does for humans because we don't live 247 and a half years, but it does to countries or to empires. And when Pluto comes back, returns to its place in the US chart, there will be, and we're already seeing this because Pluto is definitely within what we call the orb of Pluto in the chart for the US. And Pluto has a tendency to dig up the secrets, to dig up the darkness. It goes into the underworld and it excavates the darkness and brings it up to the surface so that we can deal with it, so that we can acknowledge it. And we've certainly seen that in the chart for the United States, where a lot of darkness, racism, things that we had thought were long behind us are coming up again. And there's a purpose for that. It's not complete chaos, although there is a chaotic element with Eris, but that's a subject for another story. But there's a pattern, there's some reason behind why all of this is happening. And it's to bring all of this up to the surface so that healing can begin to happen. The Pluto return won't actually culminate until 2022. Then it will be in effect through 2022 and 2023. So don't expect things to all of a sudden calm down at the end of the year, especially in the United States. And I believe that this Pluto situation in the chart of the US is why the COVID situation is so much more dramatic here. It's also dramatic in Brazil. They have their own story. So in any case, that's what's happening. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention, I'm looking at my notes here and they're not really in the order that I wanted them. But we also have had a conjunction of Jupiter to Pluto. And I'm trying to find those dates here. Here we go. So Jupiter and Pluto began to align. If you remember from that diagram, Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn were all bunched together. Jupiter and Pluto made their exact conjunction in April. That's when we started to see this big explosion of Black Lives Matter. We started to see some, a lot of these murders that have happened by police over the past months, year, started to come up around then. So Jupiter expands whatever it comes into contact with, and when it comes into contact with Pluto, it can expand this this revolutionary fervor. It can expand the attempt to control with Pluto in Capricorn. But there's also a tendency towards ideological battles with Jupiter and Pluto. So the second conjunction of Jupiter and Pluto occurs at the end of June on the 27th. So I'm recording this on June 16th. I'm not sure when people will be watching this, but if you're watching it later in the year, you'll be able to see what happened at that time. But this sort of intensity of ideologies battling is really coming to a forefront right now. And the final phase of that conjunction is in the middle of November, just as the US election is happening. So that's something to watch for. The astrology for the election period is not really fabulous. It's not really great. And so for about a year, I've been warning that either the election might not happen or Trump might try to stop it. And I'm not trying to turn this into a political discussion, so let's not do that in the comments either, please. But I think the astrology suggests that things will be pretty intense. That's at the same time when we have the final square of Mars to Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. So I think that's likely to be fairly intense. Then in December, Saturn and Jupiter conjoin at the first degree of Aquarius. So that marks a big shift out of this Capricorn dynamic where we've been dealing with corporations and structures and governments and banks and businesses and all of that. And once we move into Aquarius, it changes the energy. That's also a very big deal because the grand conjunction of Jupiter to Pluto only happens about every 200 years. So let me back up for a minute. Jupiter and Saturn conjoin about every 20 years. But every 200 years or so, approximately, the conjunction changes signs. So the conjunction for the last 200 years, except for 1980, occurred in earth signs, and now we've moved into air signs. But even more significant, we're starting to move into a very Aquarian kind of energy. Now, before you get all happy and airy-fairy about that, remembering the Hair musical in the 1960s, when there's this new age of love and, peace and understanding, I pray that that will happen. But Aquarius, there's no good or bad in astrology, and every aspect of astrology has a positive manifestation and a negative manifestation. So the positive manifestation is technological advancements, scientific breakthroughs, peace and a desire for social justice. There's likely to be, well, let me back up for a minute. We are in the doorway right now to the Age of Aquarius. The astrological ages, the great ages, change signs about every 2,150 years, but that's very approximate. And the orb of influence is about 300 years. So nobody really knows when the Age of Aquarius will start, but I believe we've been seeing a lot of signs, and I think I'll probably started in the 60s with the Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Then there was another portal in the early 90s with the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. And all of these little portals have kind of opened up some of the energy of Aquarius. And some of the signs that we're seeing are, and this may be controversial, but the rise of people on the autistic spectrum seems to me more of a mutation than a defect. I feel that it's a mutation to facilitate humanity living in the Age of Aquarius. The whole idea of LGBTQ and gender dysphoria, and now we have the non-binary sexuality. This is all very Aquarian, very Uranian. So in any case, when Saturn and Jupiter both go into Aquarius, as they will at the end of December, we'll start to see even more of these signs of the Age of Aquarius. I believe there will be more acceptance of energy medicine, more understanding of telepathy, more robotics and machines, and development of artificial intelligence to a higher degree. But Aquarius is ruled not only by Uranus, which is very liberating and revolutionary, but it's also ruled by Saturn, which has a lot to do with control. And so I think along with all of these exciting new advances, we're going to see a lot of control, such as what's coming up with the contact tracing for COVID-19, which is probably really needed, but it is a little bit, you know, Big Brother. If you've ever seen the movie Minority Report, you know, that's kind of what we're looking at with Aquarius. And then Pluto is going to move into Aquarius in March 2023. So some of this is really outside of the scope of this video, but not so much, because by the end of December, we are moving more into Aquarius out of Capricorn. And by then, the scientific breakthroughs are going to help us break through the COVID-19 situation. So the way I'm looking at the astrology for the rest of the year, and this will vary depending on your own chart. If you have a planetary transit or a progression in your chart that's very specific to you, that could change some of how this plays out. But for us globally, we have a long summer where not much is happening. We're really on pause right now. We're looking within, we're making internal changes. There's all this retrograde energy kind of causing us to look back. What didn't work? What do we really need to change so that we can move forward into this new world, really? And then so that takes us into the fall. Then in the US, we have some election strife. Probably by the time Saturn and Jupiter move into Aquarius in December, we probably have some kind of resolution, and certainly I think by January. There's a whole other planetary cycle that happens next year when Saturn squares off against Uranus. I think we're likely to see a lot more revolutionary activity then. But in terms of our lives for the rest of the year, I've been advising my clients that this is a really good time right now to be looking to a different kind of future. How can you recreate a brand new future from scratch? Because it's not like we're just going to go back to the way things were. It's going to be different. And what's really important? What is important for you? What do you want to take with you? So I think that's a really good place to end on, a good note to end on. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the description box or in the comment section. And I'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks so much.